Greetings, Wayne Bryan here. Welcome to another edition of Flashback Friday, coming to you from my video library. I don't know if you watched the Jester Awards last Sunday afternoon, but if you did, you saw we had a number of celebrity guest presenters, all with some tie to Wichita. And the first one was composer and lyricist Stephen Schwartz. Stephen has come many times to Wichita to see our shows, and we were the first city that got to do his revised version of Children of Eden, which then Music Theater Wichita championed at the National Alliance for Musical Theater Festival of New Works and got Children of Eden launched around the country. So Stephen's always been very kind to us and we love the relationship. So today we're going to talk about his favorite musical that he has worked on. And it's one that I would say I love very much. And I was very pleased with the version of it we got to do. And that is The Hunchback of Notre Dame, for which Stephen provided lyrics to music by Alan Menken. The two men have collaborated on several shows, and then in other occasions, Stephen writes his own music and lyrics. But in this one, they collaborated. The story goes back quite a ways, though, if we go back to its author, Victor Hugo. I'm sure Victor Hugo would be very surprised to learn how successful he is as a librettist for big musicals. He only wrote novels, and one of them he wrote in 1832 was Notre Dame de Paris, celebrating the great cathedral in Paris, the title of which translates to Our Lady of Paris. Notre Dame de Paris is a sprawling, wonderful work set in 1482, 10 years before Columbus, right after the invention of the printing press. And it deals with quite an assortment of characters. And the characters all reflect the character of the cathedral, with its contrasts of light and dark, with grotesque gargoyles sitting on top of beautiful rose windows. It's a fascinating study of the good and bad impulses in people. And you have a character, Quasimodo the bell ringer, who is physically deformed but has a wonderful spirit. You have the man who's taking care of him, Claude Frollo, a religious man who tries to do right but is masking a very twisted soul. And you have Esmeralda, the gypsy girl, who looks confident and sensual, but actually is quite vulnerable and very sweet. Wonderful characters. When the book was translated into English, the character of Quasimodo took everyone's imagination. So even though the book had been called Notre Dame de Paris and centered on the cathedral itself, the book in all the American editions was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is the version that has been read most often, but we don't even know who the translator was. They're anonymous. In subsequent years, more accurate translations have been taken from the original French, but in all of its manifestations, it's a fascinating read. There have been graphic novels and young people's editions that soften the story quite a bit. And immediately, the story was attractive to filmmakers. It was filmed as a silent film many times, but the one that really put it on the map was the one starring Lon Chaney in 1923. This is a pretty magnificent movie for a silent film. And if you have a chance to see it, I think you'll enjoy it. Even better is the 1939 version with Charles Laughton. This is very thoughtful. It's not very faithful to the book. Hardly any of them are. But he has a wonderful portrayal. And Esmeralda the Gypsy is Irish Maureen O'Hara in her first American film. After that, it kept being adapted all the time. I think the first one I ever saw was one that came out in the 50s with Anthony Quinn and Gina Lollobrigida. Only Esmeralda's goat comes off very well in this one. Anthony Hopkins as a surprisingly articulate Quasimodo in a TV movie. And one that's actually pretty interesting with Mandy Patinkin, Richard Harris, and Salma Hayek that was made for TV on a limited budget, but actually has quite a few really good qualities to it. In 1996, the Disney Company took this film and made it an animated feature, even though the story is quite a bit darker than the typical Disney story. And Stephen Schwartz and Alan Menken wrote the songs. Everybody loved the songs, and everybody loved the visuals, which were preserved in a remarkable coffee table book called The Art of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And if you have a chance to look at this, it's a beautiful description of how they took the architecture of the real Notre Dame and managed to translate it into some stunning visual images. It's an extremely beautiful animated film. But in order to tell the story in a family-friendly sort of way, many liberties were taken with the plot. And even though the film got good reviews and made good money, there was always the feeling that somehow Victor Hugo's story had been compromised quite a bit in order to make it a family-friendly animated film. When German producers told Menken and Schwartz they would like to present it on stage, the Disney company agreed, and the bell ringer of Notre Dame played for 3 years in Germany in a much darker kind of telling of the story. Still, they felt more work was needed. So in 2014, another book writer was brought on board, and it was performed at the Paper Mill Playhouse and out in California as well. And this is the script, basically, that we worked when we did the show in 2017. But when they did the show in 2014, I went out to see it at the Paper Mill Playhouse. And I loved the vocal arrangements, and I always liked the story, and I love that they were able to tell the story more honestly than most of the films had been able to do. In the original book, our villain, Claude Frollo, is the archdeacon of the Catholic Church. But due to pressure from religious organizations and from the Catholic Church, hardly any of the film versions depicts him as a man of the cloth. Most of the films, including the Disney animated film, make Claude Frollo a minister of justice or some sort of socially responsible man who's in charge of policing other people. But they don't make him a man of the cloth because what he does in the story is pretty horrendous. But now we've gotten to a place where we can look at the good and bad people in lots of different professions, and they were able to tell the story and talk about how this man's religious obsession, which can be very healthy in some people, is very unhealthy in him, and that's more to the point of Victor Hugo's original story. When they did the show originally on stage in 2014, they took what we call a story theater approach, where it's just a bunch of actors, not a very big group of actors, playing all the characters, not changing clothes that much, and not having a lot of scenery, moving benches and chairs and making them different locations. And I left that production a little bit unsatisfied because I am used to having the story have big epic sweep. So I thought about it, and I chose not to do the show at our theater that year. But then they recorded an absolutely amazing cast album. And in listening to the cast album, I could picture the kind of cinematic version of the story that I felt served the material to my taste, just to my taste, and what I thought our audiences would enjoy. So we mounted it in 2014. Jay Branson did a beautiful structural set that could become lots of different locations. And a wonderful video animator named Timothy Babb did illustrations that came to life that were projected onto the scenery and onto different parts of the stage, and it was really quite magical. And a video wizard named Michael Commendatore made that all happen. George T. Mitchell designed about 300 costumes for all the characters, and we had a cast of 83, including 30 singers from Butler Community College, led by their leader, Matthew Udland, who did a great job and also played Saint Aphrodisias. Our leads were Skyler Adams, who has been here quite often ever since he was a member of the Young Company, and Erin Clemons was gorgeous Esmeralda, another former company member who, until very recently, was in the Broadway cast of Hamilton. And the villain was played wonderfully by Monte Riegel Wheeler, who managed to convey all the menace and all the scary things, but made him somehow sympathetic at the same time. Mark Lukas played Phoebus, and we were very pleased with the way the whole thing came together. Here are a few clips from that production, choreographed by Nicholas Palmquist and directed by me. We hope you enjoy these clips from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I hope that leads you to listen to the cast album, maybe read the book, and explore some of the film versions. So here is The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
day, and then I swear I'll be content with my share. Won't resent, won't despair, old and bent, I won't care. I'll have spent one day out there.
Something streaming in from Charlotte to Calais.
Scurvy nature, extra scurvy on the 6th of January.
All because it's Topsy-Turvy Day. Hey!
Like other true knights, I've got ambition, but for a few nights, fun is my mission. So what do you say? Care to share a day of rest and recreation?
Come see me dance to the rhythm of the tambourine. Flash of an ankle, flip of a skirt. Feel them excite, inflame and inspire. Come see me dance, hey, what can it hurt? It's just a dance to the rhythm of the tambourine.
Protect me, Maria! Don't let this siren cast her spell. Don't let her fire sear my flesh and bone. Destroy Esmeralda, or let her taste the fires of hell, or else let her be mine and mine